Let's go ahead and start the work session. If we could go around the table. Mr. Birch, please. Chris Birch.
Sorry, L.B. Gray Jackson.
Dick Trainey.
Tim Steele.
Amy Domboski.
Jennifer Johnson.
Adam Trombley.
Paul Holman.
Patrick Flynn.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council. Debbie Osiander trying to further an ordinance that she started a long time ago.
And do we have Mr. Hall on the phone? I'm told he's supposed to join us. Just for the public that's here, I'd like to outline the way that this is going to go. This is an assembly work session, so there's not going to be the opportunity for public testimony. That will take place when the ordinance comes before the body and the public hearing date is set, and you can come forward and speak to us for the 3 minutes. This is going to be an opportunity. We're going to give Ms. Osiander 30 minutes. We're going to give Andy with the Transportation Commission a half hour, and then Mr. Brennan some time at the end. At the same time, depending on how time goes, I know there's some individuals from the disability community who, if an assembly member wants to bring them up, can't ask them to come up and ask questions. So we'll go ahead and start. Ms. Osiander?
Thank you. This ordinance basically does two things. It increases competition and it increases accountability in regulated vehicles. The ordinance gradually removes the restrictions on the number of taxis in the municipality, thus opening the industry up to some market control. There is really no reason that I have ever heard for the city to support a monopoly that benefits only the few existing permit holders and often actually hurts the drivers through rigid lease rates and restrictions. Many, many cities have moved down this path. It was astounding when I got on the internet and I started looking at how many cities have gone through this process. I also had multiple conversations with representatives of the attorneys from the Federal Trade Commission about taxi cab regulation and what they're looking for. The Federal Trade Commission has actually taken legal action against some cities with restricted entry because of their view of conflict with federal antitrust laws. They are very interested in what we are doing now, and they have submitted a letter in support of the ordinance. I forwarded it to all of you via email. This ordinance recognizes the investment that some permit holders have by allowing them to depreciate the value of the permit over time, actually over a 10-year period. And it also allows only a limited number of new permits to come in the market annually in support and recognition of the investment that some permit holders have currently. The ordinance does call for the elimination of the existing permit auction system. We have sold permits for $1,425, but they're sold back and forth between people. The last two were for $155,000. Significant disparity. The goal of the ordinance is that the permits will become a municipal asset rather than a private one. This basically will also require the new permit holders to be owner-operators to avoid the existing situation where we've got driver lease costs that are putting some burden on taxi drivers, and also some of the difficulties we've had in dealing with out-of-state permit holders. This ordinance, several times now I've heard people reference, well, we tried this by referendum some years ago. This is not the same as that. This is not a blanket deregulation. It's an attempt to open up the marketplace and actually, in many cases, increase accountability for regulated vehicles. The restriction that we've got now on permits is really hurting a significant proportion of our citizens. The people who are most dependent on cabs are typically seniors, disabled people, unemployed people, poor people. And there's currently a major lack of, in particular, accessible vehicles, handicapped accessible vehicles for those populations. I've talked now to representatives of many folks representing the disability community. I've talked to representatives of the Governor's Council on Disabilities, the Alaska Mobility Coalition, and Access Alaska. And to one, every one of them has said this is our top issue. It's very important for us to open the taxi cab market up for our folks. I've also heard some incredible horror stories. Those of you who were at the Public Safety Committee yesterday heard from a gentleman who said he frequently has to wait up to 5 hours for a cab. I have heard stories about people waiting at the airport indefinitely because accessible vehicles don't come. And the rationale given is, well, we're busy on other calls, and so we don't have to go. What this ordinance does is basically say that 10% of new cab permits coming in will be for accessible vehicles. It requires a simplified complaint process. It makes special accessible permits more accountable by requiring extra training, and for both dispatch and drivers to record the actual time they received the dispatch and the time that a vehicle was sent to the scene. And if it's longer than 30 minutes in that time period, there has to be a reason given. These trip sheets also have to show that at least 35% of the calls with an special accessible permit have to be for accessible calls themselves. So it basically calls accountability. If you've got this special permit, that you're going to do a significant portion of response to accessible calls. And it allows for fines and/or possible loss of permit if you don't follow through. Well, not only is there the problem with lack of accessible vehicles, we've got big portions of the community that have no public transportation and big times where there's no public transportation. I know a lot of us have spent a lot of time with buses. Right, Ms. Gray Jackson on that. I know that when Chugach Eagle River lost 2 of its 3 bus routes, my calls and the constituent interaction I had on that issue went way up. Our senior population is also growing. I've talked to a number of people who would love to be able to take a cab because they just plain don't trust themselves driving. Right now, you have the only option for folks is to go with the people mover system and their special vans, and that you have to schedule way in advance. It frequently will take a whole day just for a medical appointment. There's an incredible and growing need. The other big problem that I'm trying to address in this ordinance is the bar break problem. We've all spent a lot of time on that one. I remember, I think my first assembly meeting, Anna Fairclough introduced an ordinance about extending hours at bars, and all the conversation, the agreement has been, the difficulty is lack of cabs at bar break. So what I tried to do in this ordinance was go to the people in the industry and ask them how they think it would be solved best. So I met several times with the board of directors of CHAR and instituted what they think will work. I also talked to the police department, who you may be interested to know are running a ban on weekends to deal with the public inebriates on the street. What this ordinance would do is it would create up to 3 special safety permits, public safety permits, and each permit would allow up to 10 vehicles that could operate only between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. with a requirement that their trip sheets show that 80% of the trips are to or from facilities that serve alcohol. They'd obviously have a separate dispatch system and have markings and would be prohibited from picking up calls outside of that time period. The third big area that's been problematic is one I mentioned briefly earlier, are outlying areas. I've talked to the Girdwood Board of Supervisors, and they've had ongoing discussions through the years about the lack of public transportation. I remember one of my very first meetings on the Anchorage School Board, I had to go down and tell those folks that the activity bus was cut up to south, and boy, did I get skinned on that one. And that's something that they may have to deal with again in the future with the school district budget looking the way it is. My first term on the Anchorage Assembly, I called the transportation inspector and asked about a permit for Eagle River. And at that time, I was told, don't even bother, you will never get one. Well, time passed, we got more and more need with the loss of the bus routes and our population demographics changing in Eagle River. So I went a few months ago and requested again to have some more taxi service for Chudiak Eagle River. And the meetings on that one are still continuing. The only real response I've gotten is one from the permit holders to suggest that they would support a permit that only allowed travel within Chudiak Eagle River. But I've been repeatedly told that that would won't pencil or solve the problem. So that's really broad brush, the biggest changes. The most controversial one is obviously adding the new market competition system for the permits. But I think it's really important for you to be aware that the majority of the bulk of this ordinance are with new accountability standards. I really work closely with both the Department of Law and Mr. Musser, our transportation inspector, to see what the commission has been talking about, what needs he saw in the field that needed to be dealt with. As with much of our code, this particular title is outdated and not reflecting of current needs. So the new standards in there show both ability to deal with violations with clearer standards and reporting requirements. It'll be easier to suspend or revoke permits. We've never really done that in this town. It will clarify due process and strengthen the public, the hearing officer, so that code violations be treated in a similar way in this title as in other titles. There are new dispatch reporting requirements, including both the time of call and dispatch, new reporting requirements for accidents and vehicle damage, and there's a revised alcohol and drug testing section to be in accord with current case law that the municipality has gone through. There's new mechanical equipment standards, including video with 72-hour recording, GPS with silent alarm, computer or two-way radio dispatch. There's a section on substandard parts and restructured title being prohibited. There's updated rules for vehicle inspection to include structural analysis. There's also a new section of oversight for out-of-district vehicles. We've had a whole bunch of cabbies come in from the valley and basically ignored them. This, if it passes, will have those vehicles pay a registration fee and undergo a safety inspection. There's also increased consumer protection for both the driver and the patron of regulated vehicles. Simplified complaint process with new accountability language. Goes right to the PI, so he knows when the complaints occur, and he'll be able to get the background paperwork to check into it. Response time reporting requirements, I think, are really vital. And there's a new section that basically criminalizes non-payment of fare, which I was surprised to find wasn't the case now, and for destruction of property and a vehicle. And there's updated training requirements. I know it's big. My apologies to you guys. I know it's a pain to go through anything that's this, but it was important once I get into it. There are many, many problems with the current code. So I'm going to be around to answer questions.
Ms. Johnson?
Actually, with the Girdwood situation, same thing. We could have a permit down there, but only in Girdwood. But I got our usual discussion that you and I have about technology. And as you were exploring other municipalities and cities, have you found, because technology is changing, Mr. Birch sent us all an email with, I'm trying, not you get, what was? Hoover, which is app.
Actually, yeah.
And you keep, in all of this, you keep referring to dispatch. And I'm wondering, as you're looking into it, have you found, is dispatch something that is going to go down the way of telephone operators? Or, I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, between GPS and apps, how does this, what is?
You're right, Jennifer. Basically, there was a whole lot more that potentially could be done here. And I looked at that and I thought, yes, but oh my gosh, how do I write it? And how do you deal with all the current system which recognizes dispatch? So basically right now, all it does is add the computer assisted, but it doesn't do the phone app where you can go directly. And that's something, if you read the letter from the Federal Trade Commission, they really like and recommend we look into. So I would be supportive of that. I would also be supportive of revising the current rate structure pretty fundamentally, but that's something that, this is already a big bite to chew.
So, and so have you found, are there cities that have already, or communities gotten rid of dispatch?
I can't answer that categorically. The city that was most impressive to me was actually Washington DC, and amazingly enough. But you know, when I went up to Bethel recently with the Municipal League, it was astounding how easy and accessible taxis were. Clean and right there. I was in Spokane last week. Man, super simple and accessible. I don't think we're there. We should.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Steele?
You talked about, Ms. Oceana, you talked about the requiring the owner-operator. Is that a phased-in process? I mean, how do you deal with things like 24 hours use of the cabs? If, you know, the owner isn't going to be in there 24 hours a day.
This doesn't prohibit leasing.
And is it a phased-in requirement?
In the sense that current permit holders will continue to be able to operate as they are now, yes, they will be able to lease. The idea, though, is that the new permits would go to people who are actually operating cabs rather than who buy the permits and the testings.
But they can still rent out or lease out their cab for...
But they have to operate it for a certain period of hours, and I don't have that at my fingertips.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Oceana, I'm gonna thank you again, like I did at the Public Safety Committee meeting, for all your work. But I'm also gonna ask the same question I asked at that meeting. And my question is, you talked about all the folks that you met with. Did you meet with the permit holders too?
I met mainly with taxi drivers. I did get a call from Mr. Brennan, but he called at a time where we were heavy in Title 21, and Ms. Tucker hadn't finished the ordinance. So I asked him, could you just wait until I can breathe and I have an ordinance in front of me that's concrete? And then we haven't spoken since. So no, my conversation with permit holders has been less extensive than my conversation with everybody else.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Horniman?
Well, I guess I want to first make a general comment, which is, you know, we've been dealing with, and as you know, from the Public Safety Committee standpoint, the off-the-road program, the taxi cabs and availability for car break hours extensively. I mean, that was one of the issues, and of course, there were several layers of the onion when you peel back. You know, where do you park the car that you leave there? There's your cab stand locations for people to go in and out without blocking the roadway. I mean, there's a whole host of things that have come in. And to just generally start and say that, you know, the taxi service, and it really is just a service, much like a plumber or someone working on a remodeling of your house, it's a service. And so to that extent, I'm really concerned about, you know, where we're coming in, much like, I'm less concerned, or I guess you'd say less worried about what a permit or a leaser of a permit is paying, you know, much like someone buying or selling a house or some other type of property. So to me, that is not so much as a concern as it is, and that was my gist of the whole thing, which I was astounded to hear from the transportation inspector about the reconstructed vehicles. Not necessarily that a reconstructed vehicle, I don't know what, for the love of God, I'm gonna research this, I will, by next week I'll have better questioning, but if a car gets crashed and the front wheel's falling off, you know, does an insurance company say now it's gotta be titled reconstructed if they fix it and put it back on the road? And I think the simple answer is yes, but what extent to the damage, you know, if you just bump in and knock somebody's taillight out, you know, it shows now on all these Equifax, Carfax, or whatever, it shows everything if you take it to a reputable business where it's been serviced. But to have someone actually go to the dealer and say the car was split in half and the airbag's not working and there's all sorts of functional problems with the vehicle, I'm very concerned about that. So that's one of my questions is, why not leave the marketplace on the owner leasers of the permit and focus more on what fees licensing or regulations, particularly the area of enforcement of what we do have, and not so much about, I would say you were talking about rates, and I also see that as a concern, but I would think that if the cab service is charging too much, people aren't gonna ride, right? And then at the same time, I would think that someone who's invested heavily into their license or business is gonna take care of their business, or else they're not gonna get a return on their investment. So I would think more of the concern of the transportation office, do they have enough people to make sure there's not substandard vehicles on the road and substandard drivers on the road, and making sure that we have enough fees and permits that go into there. So maybe that's more of a comment, but I think when you said, as you said, it was a big undertaking, and it is, we're totally rewriting Chapter 11 and maybe not even enough. I mean, we talk about rates and such. So I guess from the perspective not having, we only had peripheral conversations a little, and we were busy with Title 21, the budget and all that. Where do we go, or why did we decide to go, in your case, we're looking at an ordinance that says, we're gonna change part and parcel everything we've done since unification or even before. Is that, I guess, the primary? I heard a lot of, the three main points. I think the other day you presented three main points, but am I confusing you with commentary, I guess?
No, it just, when I started looking at the title with our attorney, I couldn't fix it. I could not Band-Aid it through, and you may want to talk to Julia about that further. It required, there were big sections, whole big sections about protections for permit holders, but a lot of other stuff was ignored. My experience right now with the requirement to do a public convenience and necessity hearing is really bad, to be frank with you, because it hasn't been responsive to what I hear from the community. So I thought that it was way too much on protections and giving permits, and way too little on what I think our responsibility is to make sure citizens are safe as they get into a cab. I think that's really important.
If I may, Ms. Sherman. Sure. I agree with you, and in fact, where I think the concern, what I've been hearing from just even the off-the-road program, is a couple of areas. And one, the section that you have for allowing special permits, whether it be for lack of better terms, a car service or a shuttle. I don't know if you want to call them a cab, but regardless, some sort of transportation sanctioned by a permit holder for a special event, special time period. Whether it be on weekends or during special holidays, or even year-round if it's necessary. I guess suppose you look to see what the necessity is. And then secondly, the special service areas, like you talked about, Chugach and Girdwood, being able to, what would that look like? Would the permit being able to operate in those special areas be less than, say, someone operating in the Midtown general service area, where I guess the ability to make it is easier? So in a way, we're subsidizing, if you will, by allowing that fee or that license or permit be less. The other thing really is, for me, is from the dispatch side. Because and I would connect that more towards the availability of the existing cabs. What do we have now currently, 173 permits?
Yes.
So 173 permits, if the dispatch can't, if we were to regulate, say, that 90% of availability of that permit, whatever that is, 173, whatever the 90% would come out to be, best, quickest math, but, if the dispatch service says, hey, we're below the 90%, report that to the TI goes out and does that, question why. And there's some sanctions to that. If you want to be a permit holder, you've got to meet your 90%, folks, or we'll jerk the permit, and we'll give it to somebody who can meet that objective.
So a lot lower threshold than that.
And then you look at the disability section, and I know we'll hear some from the community, but the concern I have about availability, so that a dispatcher can say, no, you're not going to pick a flag call, and no, you're not going to the airport, you're dispatched and you will respond, so that the gentleman I think is here today, has to wait 4 or 5 hours to get a cab. So I think our focus really, in my opinion, should be, I agree it needs to be fixed. I agree that there's some changes need to be made, but I'm not real sure the focus, I think it goes a little far in the area of focus on, what does it cost of a permit and who's operating a permit.
I have to admit, my main reliance is on the market to fix a marketplace condition. And I think Chuyak Eagle River, if there really is a need there, if people could have the opportunity to try a business, then that's the solution. But to say that, no, you just can't even try it, is incorrect to me.
Thank you.
Mr. Bosky?
Debbie, I had a couple questions. First one, the 40% threshold for some of these special permits, how'd you come up with that number?
We wanted to put some accountability in the existing special permit system. And if you get a special permit to serve the disabled community, then there has to be some teeth. What I heard is that people get these permits and then just go sit in the airport and don't serve the community. So we tried to put in a threshold to show that a significant amount of that, it's a little bit discretionary, but a significant amount of that is going to what they say they want, we're gonna do.
My biggest concern when I see that is there really that much of a market need? Because if somebody has 10 trips a day, four of them have to be special needs. What if they don't get a special needs 2 days out of the week?
I would suggest you wait and talk to some of the folks here. I don't have my finger on it, but I sure heard a whole lot. It's a
Sure.
top issue for folks.
Sure. And my second question, just to follow up, law of supply and demand, right? Competition. As I read this, my biggest concern is, I don't know if this is gonna be a real fix for Chuyak Eagle River, just because if people really realize, drivers realize they make more money just coming to Anchorage, are we just gonna have more cabs in Anchorage? I mean, maybe we'll have somebody, but this versus a Chuyak Eagle River permit, I mean, if you could have done that, I mean, is that the way you would, I mean, what is your advice, or what is your,
Well, the thought, I was offered that we could do a Chuyak Eagle River permit, but the cabs could only stay in Chuyak Eagle River. And then I talked to people who tried that business in the past who said that economically that doesn't make sense. I'm not in the business, Amy, I don't know. I just had to rely on people who've got more concrete experience. And most of the people that I know need to get into town. We're, I hate to say it, but we're a bedroom community.
Oh, sure.
Well, Ms. Osiander, thank you so much for your time, and in the essence of time, we'll move on to the Transportation Commission and Andy. And for the record, and I should mention that the coughing that you're hearing on the phone is Mr. Hall. Are you still there, Mr. Hall? Yes, he is available.
Well, we need to have the paramedics.
Once for yes,
Yeah.
twice for no.
I am.
Okay, all right, good. Just for the record, we want to make sure that people know that you're here, Mr. Hall, so.
But I'm not actually coughing, I've got my phone on mute.
Oh, okay.
Mr.
So-
Bowman.
I'll do it for you.
So could you just state your name and then you're free to go?
Yeah, you bet. Andy Tierney, Chair of the Anchorage Transportation Commission.
And Eric Mustin, Transportation Secretary to the Commission.
So I'll give you guys a brief overview of what we felt we were tasked with by the Assembly. The Assembly asked the Commission to review 2013-36, more famously known as Ms. Osiander's rewrite of Title 11. We felt the best way to do that was to hold a series of public meetings, and we did allow testimony. We took 7.5 hours of testimony from the public, and what we really tried to do is distill the key issues. And I know there are more than what we looked at. It's a pretty significant rewrite, but what we looked at primarily was the big element of it's not necessarily deregulation, but the open entry element of the rewrite. We looked at fees and enforcement, the new public safety permits, the new limited permits, the elimination of the Transportation Commission and thereby eliminating convenience and necessity, the inclusion of executive sedans, which is a new category created by the new Title 11, the inclusion of out-of-district vehicles, cameras, and then the reconstructed vehicles. And there were a few others as well, but those we determined were kind of the significant changes between the existing Title 11 and the proposed Title Now, and I'll kind of take them one by one, and please feel free to ask any questions. And I guess I kind of want to give you guys a brief overview of how the cab industry works, because until I was on the commission,
Mr. Attorney, if you could, Mr. Attorney has a question.
I've got a question. Can we have this in writing, or did you commit it to writing, so we can square up your comments with this ordinance?
Yeah, you betcha, and we're working on that. We had asked, I think Eric had asked for a little more time. To answer your question, yes.
How soon?
By the middle of next week?
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So the cab industry works thusly, you have your permit owners, and then your permit owners essentially have, what that gives them is the authority to operate a cab in the city of Anchorage. You then have the physical cab owner, and sometimes that's the permit owner, sometimes it isn't. And then you have the chauffeur, and sometimes it's the cab owner and the permit owner, sometimes it's the cab owner and the chauffeur, sometimes it's just the chauffeur. And then you have the dispatch company, kind of off to the side with little commingling. And so what you have 173 permits, and that's the the commission did authorize an additional 15 in April, so if that goes through, then we'll have 188, but let's use 173. So then we have 173 times 2 drivers out there. They're essentially independent operators. They pay a daily lease fee to the cab owner, and the cab owner pays a monthly lease amount to the permit owner. And so I think most people think that when you call checker or yellow that you're calling the cab company. No, you're calling the dispatch company. And I just think that linear element is important moving forward, and how it all breaks down. So the first item was the open entry or deregulation, and a lot of the testimony we heard, clearly it has a significant impact on the permit owners without question. And so, but we looked at it from how does this, and the commission agrees that Eagle River is underserved. The bar break / holiday issue is a real issue. The handicap, ensuring that they get served is a public safety issue and one that we've been working with as well. And then just general use cab service. I want to go to the airport. Is a cab ready? Is it clean? Is the service what we expect it to be? So we looked at the rewrite and how it solved those problems. I think Mr. Holman, or somebody referenced, maybe it was you, Amy, the Eagle River issue. The commission doesn't believe that additional cabs on the road, given the makeup of the way the system works, solves the Eagle River issue. And to explain that, so you have an independent operator in town who is paying $75, $85, $90 a shift, including gas. Are they going to take the risk of and this may or may not be right, but this is the way the system works. Are they going to take the risk to drive out to Eagle River, pick somebody up at Walmart, and take them to cars, and then have to drive back? They've lost money on that trip. And so it's going to be very difficult with just additional cabs, the commission believes, to solve that Eagle River issue. What we hoped as a commission was that when Ms. Osiander first came before the commission with this issue, we had really asked the industry to provide us with an industry-driven solution. And we've received some ideas. I think those are those cogs are turning, and I'm not sure if there is a real solution there, but I think this problem must be solved by industry. My sense is that they're working towards that problem. So that's Eagle River with this
Mr. Holman?
Yeah.
Without while you're on that topic, so we don't lose the point, I hear you say the industry should solve it. Is there something government is doing or not doing that is either obstructing or either where it's available and they can do it, or we're saying you can't do it under existing conditions?
Yeah, it's a good question. With respect to the Eagle River issue, there
And
is.
let's include Girdwood, please, if you don't mind.
Right. There isn't much in current Title 11 or the revised Title 11 that the commission feels can be done to beef up service to those areas. Now there are provisions for limited use vehicle for hire permits already in Title 11. While, and we'll get to enforcement in a minute, while enforcement is a huge issue, we don't believe that it's something that would assist the outlying, the underserved areas of the municipality. The bar break holiday issue, and this is an issue that clearly needs no introduction. And what the commission, we reviewed, and thanks to Eric, a pretty detailed accounting of the 173 permits, licensed cabs, how many of those are on the road at any given day. Again, we can't, the municipality can't mandate how many of those cabs are on the road, but it does drop off significantly as it gets later in the day. People go home, we heard testimony from numerous cab drivers, not just as it relates to this rewrite, but since my tenure on the commission, that they quite frankly don't want to go down and pick up somebody who's drunk, who may mess up their car, the likelihood that they're going to skip out on their fare, get verbally assaulted. They as independent operators make the choice to not be on the road at that time of day. And so currently there's nothing, they're small business owners and that's their prerogative. Unfortunately, what it does do is it does pull cars off the road during a very critical time of day. And we have, again, asked the industry to help solve that problem. And you can't, the municipality can't require the driver to be on the road, but the person who hires that driver certainly have a lot of influence as to whether they're working their full 12-hour shift. And so there's nothing. This rewrite does have the public safety permit element, which is new. Current Title 11 does have vehicle for hire provisions in it, which does allow for that. I do have some prepared remarks on this, so with respect to the public safety permits, I will read that. The proposed ordinance creates a public safety permit category that broadly defines the category and authorizes the issuance to a single applicant of up to 10 taxi cab permits under the category of public safety. The authorization establishes a single permit fee as that of one taxi cab and allows the placement of 10 taxi cabs on the roads between 10P and 6A. The authorization does not require the permittee's services to be limited to the purpose of the permit, but authorizes the taxi cab to operate as a general area-wide cab for 20% of the time on the road, creating substantial enforcement challenges. So the recommendation of the commission is that we recognize that due to individual choices and occasional over-serving of alcohol, the prevalence of inebriates on the road is a serious public safety issue. The existing vehicle for hire structure for issuing limited service and special needs permits is in place and could be utilized to help resolve bar issues. While the commission does believe that the transportation industry must do a better job of working with the bar industry, the commission does not feel that the new public safety permit provision is enforceable and wholly justified. And I think the commission found a lot of issue with what the bar industry is, what we've heard, the commission heard from Char, I think, on 2 different occasions. And what they want to do is essentially start their own cab company. 10P to 6P, 10P to 6A is a third of the day. That's a third of the potential business that the industry currently So it does have a huge impact on the current industry moving forward. And we heard quite a bit of testimony from the public that didn't understand, this was an issue that the bar industry was creating. Now they want to create a system where they can thereby profit from it. And so this didn't make a lot of sense to them.
Mr. Tierney?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson and Mr. Holman have a question.
Please.
When you were doing your research for this, and you were trying to ascertain how many cabs are on the road between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., what was the percentage of the industry that was on the road at that point?
It's a good question. If my memory serves me correctly, there are 173 cabs. About 168 of them is about the most on average that you see on the road at any one time. And that was, and please jump in at any moment, that was mostly midday, late afternoon, late morning. And then that drops down into the mid-140s, I believe.
But the bell curve significantly declines as you get into the midnight to foyer and bar hours to as few as 90. We did an hour-by-hour snapshot over 40 days. And so you can lose 40% of the cabs by the time you hit 3 a.m.
But it's not as low as a third. I mean, so at least half the cabs are still on the road?
Yes.
And would you say of that half, do you have an idea how many are just at the airport?
No, we didn't. We really can't.
I'm just
break it
trying
up by
to
airport.
figure out how, and as I think you were trying to figure out how many are serving the downtown at that point. And then we all know is if you have a cab downtown and the person lives on the hillside, that's probably a 45-minute cab ride out and back. So I was just trying to get a feel for what's happening.
Yeah, it'd certainly be something that, that my guess is Eric would be happy to provide you, because it does provide some pretty critical.
Yeah, it'd be helpful to see a picture to get an idea.
Mr. Holman?
Well, and I guess a follow-up question on that particular, while we're on this. I'm sure that you probably heard from Charlie, maybe talk to you about the off-the-road program that they've been running. The difficulties with getting cabs, because now every patron that calls for an off-the-road, or every bar owner, there's two cab drivers committed for a period of time. Was there any discussion among the commission about, I understand your statements here, but if Char were to limit it, if you will, to their off-the-road program, so they're running their program, their cars, subsidized by the industry to do the off-the-road program, not necessarily then opening it up to just general cab rides?
Sure.
Because now you're committing, again, 2 of their vehicles, since there were 10 vehicles, you could take as many as 5 patrons at a time from a location home and back. Was there any discussion on that?
There wasn't any specific discussion about to revisit the off-the-road program. I think that we limited the scope of the testimony specifically to what was contained in the rewrite. We've had a lot of, and I think Char even admitted that they weren't as, the reason why they are, that they appear to support, that they support this is because even they knew that their off-road program wasn't sufficiently solving the issue that we can all agree is a real issue, and that's people who ought not to be out on the road at night driving. But there wasn't any talk about what we could do to that current system to help maybe make that better.
So the proposed, and I guess my question would be, and I'm just gonna throw it back to you then, gives there an opportunity for the commission to make a comment if the ordinance, as you know, can be amended? If the special permit section allowing for Char or whomever for a special permit to not participate as a general cab service. So right now it's like 20% is what's written in there, I think. No, I mean 20% general cab pickup, 80% committed to the special, right? Special concern. So if it were, let's say the special permit section were allowed, that, you know, they'd have to be in the confines of why they're operating. So let's say it's off the road.
Sure.
Would the commission be prepared to come up with some opinion on that, or?
We certainly would, yeah, we would certainly,
Because as I'm hearing it, you're not in favor, the commission is not in favor of that section of the code as presented.
the consensus was that, yes, we are not. But that said, we have been and are interested in exploring out-of-the-box solutions to the problem. And the commission desperately wants industry to come to the table and offer some creative solutions to help solve the issue.
From my experience and testimony from a couple of years of trying to tackle the problem, it's not just the industry, there's a lot of other moving parts here. Just, you know.
And I think Ms. Johnson referenced downtown, and one issue that came up throughout and has been a huge issue is with respect to the downtown establishments is they're just as inadequate staging area for cabs. I mean, and I know the Public Safety Commission, the committee has been working on that. The idea of the downtown bus depot serving as a staging area for cabs has been proposed, and we're not sure where that's going. But the drivers have told us that if they had a place to congregate downtown, and then the public ultimately would learn where they would be, that would certainly help get more people into the cabs. We do hear that constantly from the industry.
Mr. Trainee?
Adam, you said you're gonna give us your written comments in about a week or so?
Yeah.
Will that have, I wanna know if you're gonna submit those comments to your Transportation Commission, because I wanna know if there's gonna be your comments or the whole Transportation Commission.
Everything that I say and everything that you get will be commission-based. We had thought we had more time to prepare these, and so what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a draft, make sure that the commission signs off on the deal, the 5
It's 11C scheduled for this Tuesday, so we'll have to bypass it then, because we're gonna need your comments before we get into that thing.
Okay.
Question, you mentioned that the alcohol/char may want their own taxi cab service. Is that something you envision happening, or just what you're hearing from the industry?
Well, I believe that's what CHAR indicated they wanted to do during the testimony, was that
They want to run their own taxi cab industry?
Yes, because the 2013-36 allows for them to have their own dispatch company.
Any other questions?
Interesting. In here, I see that gets rid of the Transportation Commission. So we're gonna need some input. Is this where you think it should not be abolished, or it should be increased in size? Are you getting the attendance so that you got a working committee when the commission is called to meet?
Yeah, we heard the overwhelming majority of the testimony we heard didn't want the commission to go anywhere. That was primarily because convenience and necessity is a commission tool that we use to the best of our ability, get input from the public, polish up the variables, and try and determine if more cabs are necessary at any given moment. We heard testimony that the industry didn't want a political appointee to be the sole decision maker, and that would essentially, a lot more responsibility would fall on the TI, and a lot of, we just heard a lot of testimony that was something that they did not want to see happen.
Currently, you've got one executive, you've got a code enforcement officer part-time, and you've got one other person there, is that correct, just 2 people?
Yes.
So for you, are you getting overworked, or, I mean, I don't see how you can run this program with this staff.
It is extremely difficult, even with our present levels. Enforcement is nearly impossible. We've had an increasing reliance on the legal department, who has stepped up really to assist. The ABD CAP team has stepped up and really done a tremendous job assisting us. We've had to pull in a few resources in the last year just because of shortfalls in law enforcement abilities.
So Rick, have you requested the administration to increase your staff size? Or has anything been done to increase the amount of staff that you've got to enforce current Title 11 as we have it now?
Yeah, Mr. Tran, the administration has worked along with us to support increased staffing levels subject to the funding, which the sponsor of this has included. The fee increases are there to take the 18-hour week enforcement up to full-time and to add an additional full-time investigator or code enforcer to
Thank
strengthen.
you. I've got the financials here, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can we have Mr. Tierney wrap up this? He's only have 5 minutes. I'd like to hear the rest of what he has to say.
Yeah, just one quick note on enforcement. The commission overwhelmingly agrees that the TI's office is massively understaffed. And it's understaffed under the current Title 11, it's understaffed under the new, but it's a self-funded office currently today. And so there are some challenges, but the industry demands significantly more enforcement than it has. Given we have 5 minutes, let me just go through a few final areas that we talked about. The limited permits, which would be the limited areas, Girdwood, Eagle River, or any other issues. We recognize that it is a big deal, making sure that everybody in the municipality gets served. Existing Title 11 does allow limited permits where determined by convenience and necessity. One thing we did hear, and it's tough on any commission, we heard a lot of testimony from people who were willing to operate in Eagle River, but they wanted that permit to be an Anchorage permit at some point. And what the commission felt that what would happen is that they would simply fall back and do what the other 173 cabs are primarily doing, and that's making the most money they can as small business operators who fall into Anchorage. Yeah, the commission is unanimously against getting rid of the commission. Executive sedans is a new classification in Miss Oceander's version, and the commission was a little troubled that what we felt is that essentially anybody with a car could just go out and start shuttling people around town, and the pressure that would put on enforcement didn't justify the means. And then out of district vehicles, there is reference to this in existing Title 11. It's an enforcement issue. Cameras, the commission forwarded some language a while back to the assembly. We're wholly supportive of 2015-36's language regarding cameras and reconstructed vehicles as well. And I think that pretty much covers it. If you guys have any other questions.
I do, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your comments here and for the work that the commission's done. I know that you and I had talked privately, and there was going to be some maybe resolution coming from the commission as far as how far you'd like us to kick this out to give you the necessary time to do the work that you want to do, to work with industry and other community involved members. Is there any time frame that you want? What I don't want to do is I don't want to rush it. There's no sense in rushing this.
Sure. Well, I think the commission is at this point, we were tasked to review and advise the assembly, and that's what we've done. And we'll do that in a little further detail when we submit our final memo to you. It then becomes an issue of where this goes. If the assembly would prefer the commission to make recommendations, if you prefer us to even rewrite it, or I think it's really up to the assembly at this point, what you'd like us to do.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Brenner,
Sit over there.
please. And you have a half an hour, but if you need less than that, you don't have to take the whole time.
Please let me know if I'm going too long.
Sure. And just for the record, if you could state your name.
Sure. Jim Brennan, I'm an attorney for the Anchorage Taxi Cab Permit Owners Association, also known as ANHOA. I've represented this association of permit owners for many years, and I sympathize with this assembly and trying to grapple with the details and the complications of taxi cab regulation in Anchorage. It's not something you can get in a quick study. And in fact, I was around when the Assembly grappled with a 62-page set of ordinance reforms that came to fruition in 1999. That took 2 years. Mr. Baggage was involved at the time, and that was anything but a situation where industry got everything it wanted. It was very much a contested process. And so here we are again. And there have been tweaks between 1999 and now. It's not like this is some kind of antiquated, what did I hear, outdated set of ordinances. Title 11 has been tweaked and is probably as current as any set of as any title that you have, with the exception of maybe Title 21. I want to address first this question of was industry contacted. We approached Ms. Osiander when she heard she was doing this, and held ourselves out to we know there are some issues, and I want to get to 3 particular issues here. We had some constructive input, and the response, as she accurately stated, was wait till I get something more concrete. And so we waited. We also approached her during a hearing that the Transportation Commission had in Eagle River on these issues, and once again it was wait and see. Well, the next thing we heard was the 67 or 68-page ordinance being plopped on the table. It was a done deal. So we've never had a chance to talk to have our input into it, and I very much appreciate, Mr. Chairman, your giving me an opportunity. I know this is only a work session, and we do intend to testify when Assembly does bring this up at formal hearing. We have some constructive input. We want to give that in detail. There's not going to be enough time here. But this is, I grew up in Alaska, and this is unique in my experience, that the regulated industry, the governmental entity that's going to revise the regulations concerning it, doesn't want to deal with the industry. I mean, I grew up in a town of the fishing industry. Fishing industry was always involved in regulatory matters. The oil industry, we all know, is very much involved in regulatory issues. Construction industry, realtors, you name it. We have been treated like the enemy here. Whatever input we have can't possibly be helpful. Now, I do represent the permit owners here, and part of what I have to say will concern them. But most of what my comments are about what is sensible regulation for the entire industry and for the taxi cab customers of Anchorage. Let me come back to the fact that this has been subject to revision, very substantial revision, not that long ago. And as a result, Anchorage has a very well-regulated taxi cab industry. I think Ms. Smith passed out to you a report done by Professor Ray Mundy, who is a St. Louis, Missouri expert on transportation issues. It was done on Anchorage in 2008. It's an objective study. It's based upon computer dispatch records. When was the call for service? Where was the service requested at? And when was the service provided? And Anchorage stacked up very well compared to other American cities. Yes, it takes longer as you get farther from the city center, but it's still reasonable for the time to get there. Also, I might just add that for American cities of Anchorage's size, we actually have substantially more taxi cabs per population than the average. On a per capita basis, for cities of our size. So it's not an underserved city in terms of overall taxi cab service. And there is a point to having your existing public convenience and necessity system for determining whether you need more permits. If you have too many permits, there's a problem there. And that is that there's not enough fares, customers out there per customer, per taxi cab, for the taxi cabs to operate reasonably. Other cities that have tried opening up entry or flooding their cities with taxi cab permits have had this problem, that you now have a problem with the taxi cab drivers supplementing their income in ways that we would not like to see in Anchorage. On the other side of the, and you also have them cutting corners in quality of taxi cabs and also turning down short rides. Anchorage does not have that problem. On the other side of the problem, if you don't have enough permits, then you don't get adequate, you don't get fast enough service. But as this study showed, generally, Anchorage customers get fast enough service. There are 3 exceptions I'm about to get to, and those are the things that we should be dealing with. This idea that many cities are deregulating, opening up, that's not true. It's just the opposite. In the 1980s, there was this fad towards deregulation, and it was a flop. So most of those cities that tried it went back to regulating the number of taxi cab permits. And so also I hear reference to the Federal Trade Commission and suits being brought against cities. I'm not aware of any case where any such suit was brought to fruition, where it was determined that a city was violating antitrust laws. In fact, the great majority of American cities of Anchorage's size and larger regulate the number of taxi cabs on a public convenience and necessity basis. And obviously, if this is an antitrust issue, they wouldn't be able to do it. So it's sensible regulation, and it's working, except for, in Anchorage, there are 3 problems. Service to Eagle River, the Eagle River area, which I include Peters Creek and Chugiak, the bar break issue, and the handicap service issue. Those 3 things need to be addressed. We have, by we, I mean my client, the Permit Owners Association, has wanted to address that and has made suggestions for that, and we stand ready to address it and work with people to fix it. It's not fixed by the 67-page ordinance, which throws a number of more permits of various categories, 10 more permits per year generally, individual permits with up to 10 cabs, special needs permits, public safety permits. You know, you lose count. It's going to be, hundreds, at least 100 more permits in a not very long period of time, and that is what doesn't work. It's not going to work to solve these particular issues. So let's talk about the 3 issues. The issue we thought, which was the genesis for this ordinance reform proposal, was the Eagle River. Now, as has been pointed out here, existing ordinance authorizes a limited permit to be given for a geographic area. That was tried. 2 different operations tried an Eagle River dispatch company, and they both went out of business because it wasn't economic. So we have the existing Anchorage-based dispatch companies and the Anchorage-based taxi cabs that it is uneconomic often for cab drivers to go up there. That doesn't mean they don't go up there. We dispute that they don't go up there. The transportation inspector did a study recently and found they do go up there. But we would concede that the service is far from ideal in Eagle River. So how do you mess with that? How do you fix that? The way you fix it is with an Eagle River-based dispatch, or taxi cab service. And as I stated previously, that didn't work when we tried it here, but there is a way to make it work, we think, and we have made a concrete proposal, including proposed ordinance language, that would authorize the existing, right now there's 2 dispatch companies in Anchorage, there could be more, authorize them to dispatch cabs to Eagle River taxi cabs, cabs that are painted with some kind of Eagle River name, Eagle River cab or whatever, with different colors. The problem right now is a dispatch company can only dispatch they have to have one uniform, one-size-fits-all color and markings. And so you wouldn't know that there's a specialized Eagle River cab up there. But if Alaska Yellow or Checker could dispatch to an Eagle River cab, which could be done with a minor ordinance change, then that would be possible. So what we would propose is issuance of at least 2 permits at the outset for an Eagle River cab, not restricted, as Ms. Osiander just stated, that they could only operate in Eagle River or Chugiak. That's not what we were proposing. What we were proposing is that these permits would have to originate their trips in Eagle River or Chugiak, but they could bring passengers to the Anchorage airport or into Anchorage. The restriction would be that they not be allowed to pick up passengers from Anchorage. When I say Anchorage now, I know Eagle River is part of Anchorage, but I'm distinguishing the two just for this discussion.
Yeah, it's debatable from Eagle River.
No, actually, I'm trying to get rid of you, and that's Debbie.
But the point I'm trying to make is that if they were allowed to pick up trips in Anchorage, that would make it difficult enforcement-wise to hold them to a restriction, because what we would want to do is say, serve Eagle River customers. And we think this would be a potentially economic operation. It doesn't require setting up a whole new taxi cab dispatch company in Eagle River, which is why the prior 2 operations failed. And we have talked with both the dispatch companies, Alaska Yellow and Checker, and they can make it work. They've got computer dispatch. So that's our concrete proposal there. We would like that to see the light of day. It would require, as I say, a little bit of ordinance tweaking by the Assembly. Second problem, bar break. This has been a long-standing problem, and it's kind of an endemic problem when you think about it. As I was discussing earlier, you don't want to have too many taxi cabs generally, or people are not going to make money, and you're going to have substandard taxi cab service in Anchorage. But what happens when one industry, the bar industry, suddenly, in the middle of the night, in the space of a half an hour or so, floods the market with a whole bunch of people demanding taxi cabs all at once? That's a special problem that needs to be dealt with, but it should be recognized that part of that problem is of the bar's making. Now, this Assembly, to its credit, recently, as I understand it, adopted an ordinance that says, okay, you can stay open on your premises for an hour after you quit serving beverages, which is great, because that spans out the time by which taxi cabs can pick people up, so they don't have to stand out in the middle of the street in January at night. But it's voluntary. It depends on the bars voluntarily doing this. And it'll be interesting to see if they step up to the plate to do that. It's a problem that they have some responsibility for here, and hopefully they will take advantage of the latitude that this Assembly has given them to do that. That's not the only solution to that problem. One of them is more taxi cab stands, as was pointed out here.
Mr. Brennan,
Actually, you can finish.
Okay.
And another creative way to deal with the issue, it's been pointed out here that it's not the most favorite customer to pick up for cab drivers, and they are independent businessmen. They are independent contractors and women. And they sometimes do not want to go to pick up drunks, people that might make a mess in their cab, people that might be boisterous, people that might not pay a fare. Best solution we see to that, in addition to the other ones we talked about, is good old economic incentive. Again, something that would require ordinance change. Allow them to charge a higher fare during certain hours to pick up people from liquor establishments, bars, restaurants that serve liquor, at least on weekends and holidays. The other way to approach that, right now, this is getting down in the weeds here, but there's an exclusive ride provision that when you hire, as a customer, hire a taxi cab, that's your cab, you don't have to share it with anybody. You could make an exception during those hours to provide for a shared ride. Now, we've discussed this with Mr. Honeman's subcommittee. There are some wrinkles in it, and But that is an option that's out there. And the other option that's out there is to use the transit facility as a cab stand during those hours, which the transit company is agreeable to, transit department. And there's a meeting scheduled just for this Wednesday among CHAR and I believe the Downtown Partnership and others, and certainly the taxi cab industry, to which Ms. Ossiander is invited to try to address a possible shuttle service to go from downtown bars to the transit facility during bar break hour. Was there a question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I was thinking as far as your suggestion for Eagle River is having an Eagle River centric cab that had eagles all over it.
Eagles, okay.
Whatever, but it said that it was from Eagle River. And when you're going as far as the downtown, different things that could maybe correct it. And I understand that CHAR was thinking of having their own permit or cab or van of some sort. Would a CHAR van with CHAR written all over it, where they could pick up and deliver, would that have the same kind of permit and answer that your Eagle River one does, so that they wouldn't be doing anything other than that in the hours given, but they had a defined purpose, and everybody knew what the defined purpose was, and everybody knew that it had big CHAR on it?
Well, it's a little vague to me now. That's exactly what the proposal is.
No, and I don't know if this is a
No,
proposal, I just sort of
No,
wondered.
but we've heard it before you brought it up. I mean, we heard it today here. And I heard it in terms of their own dispatch company. So, well, they could do that under existing ordinance.
Yeah.
They also might be able to do it under existing ordinance as what's called a vehicle for hire, which is a separate category. There's taxi cabs, limousines, and vehicles for hire. Vehicles for hire authorized shuttle services for specific services, and so depending upon exactly how they configured it, it might fly under that. I don't think that the proposed new ordinance is a feasible way to address it. That ordinance proposes that there be a permit for a new business that would get up to 10 taxi cabs, but they would have to run 80% of their trips would have to serve the bars, and they would only be able to operate from 10 p.m. till I think it's 6 a.m. That's not going to work. People aren't going to sign on to. They're not going to make money. Drivers are not going to make enough money doing that. It's better to try to work this problem out in the existing system. This is a problem, but there are at least 4 different ways to address it. And a 5th could be, maybe a vehicle for hire shuttle for CHAR. This is something where I do think the liquor industry does have some responsibility. They are making money off of this situation where people are kept there until a certain hour and then dumped out on the street in the middle of the night. And it would make sense that they have some role. I don't want to make this too pejorative, but they should have some role to work with us to try to fix this problem. But one big way they could help us give us more cab stands right by the bars, so that the cab can park instead of circling the street, and so that the customer coming out knows where to find a taxi cab. That would go a long ways right there.
We have Mr. Horn and Mr. Steele. They can wait. They'd wait till they have Mr. Trainee. You had something
Good
else.
question. When you're planning for this transit center, keep in mind it's going to move one of these days to Midtown.
Oh, I did not know that.
It's in the future to have that happen. Can't tell you when, but that's the projection. So
Okay.
just to let you know.
All right.
Yeah, actually, for time, I think I will take Mr. Horn and then Mr. Steele and get the questions answered.
One comment and I guess a question too. I heard you, one of the concerns I know about the exclusivity, and you and I have had conversations in the interest of public safety. If there were 4 or 5 friends out, like celebrating a birthday or softball game or whatever, and they know each other, knowing where each other lives isn't an issue. But if you get 4 or 5 strangers, particularly mixed company, co-ed, you got a bunch of inebriated people with really probably questionable judgment at that time. finding out where another person lives. I'm pretty uncomfortable in the public safety perspective. You know, people that don't know each other, so the shared less than serious concern.
I understand that, and that is a devil in the details,
Yeah.
getting right down to it. I guess, and maybe there is no getting around that. There's no forcing a woman to stay in that cab
Right.
if she doesn't want to go in that company.
So I think that's one area, and then the
Yeah.
other one is, and I appreciate you bringing up all the issues that we've previously discussed, trying to get through the hurdles have been challenging, of course, at best. And that is the issue of, you know, I still see where a special permitting for special concerns like events, which allowed under the code anyway. currently,
Yeah, already.
Shouldn't be, I think even the existing owners would probably say, hey, you know, if it's not being met, if its needs not being met currently, what's wrong with at least trying it, because the market's gonna find out if it's working or not. I mean, I would think-
Absolutely, and there's a lot of flexibility in the existing code.
So why not, why, are you opposed to change just simply because of the way it's written? You know, the special needs section of the code?
On just the special needs where this one business gets 10 permits, yeah, that's just throwing a bunch of permits at the problem. And also this 10 p.m. to 6, where you have to have 80% of your customers being bar customers, difficult to enforce, and I don't think it'll work economically.
And then lastly, just to follow on, I probably would go with your clients and ask the same thing, which was, what if it were restricted strictly to the specific special need concern area, you know, just in that area, bar area only, no 20% open to any other pickup. And secondly, we haven't even gotten to the disabled
Yeah, I hadn't got that
disabled
yet.
community. So, I mean, I just see that there's a problem when you've got someone who has a difficulty talking, is one part of the problem, and we have people with TBIs, and the gentleman who spoke the other day very eloquently. If you were on the other end of the phone call, you might think the person might be sober, and maybe you're, you know, we'll get to you in a little bit, you know, and it goes on hours and hours of waiting for a cab, and yet they've got money and they're a customer just like anybody else.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, let me just address that, because the handicap problem, I didn't mean to save it for last because it's least. It's a very important problem. In fact, our organization supported the issuance of the 6 initial handicap taxi cab permits in Anchorage, which was about 10 years ago. We very much supported that. And we're very disappointed in that they were issued, the way they were issued is they were allowed to serve handicap, but also allowed to serve the general public, which had, for economic reasons, taxi cab drivers couldn't make money unless they were able to do that. We supported that too. The problem was, enforcement-wise, the handicap were not prioritized. So you got these 6 permits out there, and they're, from all the information I'm receiving, we're receiving, they are not prioritizing handicapped customers. So as a result, we hear these horror stories too.
so just to follow it, do you know if the dispatch center, thank you, Mr. Chairman, the dispatch centers, are they asking as a part of protocol, is this gonna be a handicap pickup? I mean, that might be a simple question.
I'm the wrong part. I believe the answer to that is correct, but it's yes.
That is correct. Dean Paul, Lesbian Dispatch.
So that, one of the questions is part of it, if someone calls and says, I need a cab, one of the questions is this a handicap pickup?
Well, we don't say, is this a handicap pickup, but the people that are requesting handicap service are providing that information on their own.
What if they don't? How are you gonna know not to send a disabled cab?
Then it's a problem when the driver arrives to the pickup location, but that's not a question that's asked. Otherwise, you'd have to say, do you need a child seat? Do you need an infant seat? You have to ask all the different attributes. How many people are gonna ride? I mean, you'd have to ask, you'd be on the phone for 2 minutes asking all the questions of the different attributes for each.
We just ask a simple question as to whether do you need any
If you could
special
just,
I believe the main problem there is that we do have handicap permits out there, but the permittees are not prioritizing the handicap as they should be. As I understand it, Inspector Musser is going to lean on them to make that happen from now on. The other thing that's happened here is just about a month ago, the Transportation Commission just voted to issue 5 more handicap permits. So there will soon be 11 handicap permits on the road in Anchorage, and a question of prioritizing and enforcing the prioritization, I understand Inspector Musser will be pushing.
I had Mr. Steele.
Yeah, I have lived in communities where, whether you call it an automobile or a van for hire, or whatever you call it, but in outlying areas where they would, on a scheduled basis at least, run to the big city. But they were allowed to also pick up and run back, so that you're not highballing back. But it seems to me, if we're not going to provide quality bus service to these areas, then maybe there's a market there for some independent to do a cab for hire on certain, every hour, every couple hours, or just to meet flight time at the airport, or whatever it is in terms of schedule-wise. But cab for hire, vehicle for hire, pick up, it has Eagle River on it, or whatever, Valley, even up that way, but something that is in between bus service and cab service that is woefully inadequate. So it seems to me that something like that could be worked out, but they have to have the ability to have a return fare as well.
Sure, and there is an existing vehicle for hire service, an Eagle River shuttle, and there is an existing ordinance that authorizes that kind of service. And
how's it work? Are they making money?
If you're not making money, there's not enough business, so it does work. There have been applications for, more than ever, for vehicle for hire shuttles. In fact, we think they're abusing it, and some of them operating more like taxi cabs, but that's a separate issue. There is existing authorization for exactly what you're talking about, and somebody could do it. There are, for example, vehicles for hire that serve Medicaid-only patients, that type of thing. So the existing ordinances provide for this. The special problem with handicap, and it's been a frustrating one for us because we supported this whole thing. Would it involve issuance of more permits, which people thought, oh, the permit owners will never support that? Yeah, it did. We supported it. And as I say, now there's 5 more that have been issued. So I guess what we would ask is that that be given a chance, together with Inspector Musser's enforcement of prioritization, to work on handicap.
Actually, can we?
Just one quick one, just quick. GPS, the GPS suggestion is a good one to be able to track the handicap cabs. If they're supposed to be picking up handicap, if you know where they are, then you should be able to dispatch the appropriate vehicles.
Ms. Greg Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. And the first off, I didn't know that there were 6 handicap permits out there. First question is, what exactly is a handicap permit?
Okay, it's a permit that authorizes you only to operate a vehicle that has been altered to allow handicap access. By that, either a hydraulic lift, or more commonly, most of them are minivans with a flop-down ramp with room so that you roll the wheelchair.
ADA required. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Okay. I
ADA
appreciate that.
compliant, yeah.
And so my next question is, so what's the cost to get a handicap permit?
They got them at reduced price because they put them out for auction. The municipality, put it out for auction, and those came in at roughly, my recollection is about 30% of the cost of a normal transferable permit.
Okay, and then 2 more questions. And so, what percentage of riders have to be handicapped? If you have
There's no
handicap.
requirement there.
There's no requirement?
And as I say,
Okay.
there's insufficient requirement that they prioritize handicap.
Okay, and so last question is, so what's the process to pull a license if they're not, doing what they said, what the license was permitted for?
Well, there is an existing ordinance that says they're subject to revocation, and I think that's probably in the contract by which these the permits that were let out. But there apparently is not enough teeth in it because it's not
Apparently,
happening.
it isn't. So you've answered all my questions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we're approaching 1:30. In just closing comments, I think, I don't want to speak for the body, but this is an issue, obviously, there's a lot to be worked on, and I don't want to tell our commission what to do. It would be helpful, and I'll talk with Mr. Hall over the weekend and see what we can do as far as helping you, asking you to help us some more as far as making those recommendations. like I said, I don't want to tell the commission what to do, so. Yeah, and as always, it includes the disability commission and industry and all the stakeholders as well. But we'll talk to you later after I talk with Mr. Hall over the weekend. So with that, it's 1:30, we are adjourned.